What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Eastern Current. If you're watching here, and maybe if you're listening, it could be really loud. I've got a new mic set up. As most of y'all know, if you know anything about technology, my setup for my podcast is pretty minimal and kind of terrible. But this, I've had a lot of y'all complain about the loud bumping noises from hitting the table because I use this condenser mic. Because my old switching board crashed on me and I kind of didn't want to spend the money. So this is my new cheaper setup. But hopefully it's easier to listen to. Hopefully y'all enjoy it. And hopefully the sound comes out well on this. I've got Dan in the house tonight. It was a very busy week for me. I'm actually selling a boat this week. I had a bunch of trips and I just did not get around to recording a podcast early in the week. And Dan was nice enough to come on here. We were going to try to do it last night and then that fell through. And so we're doing it tonight. It's Friday night. I'm going to get this up online tonight as well. I guess it's Friday the 15th. But just a quick reminder, if you haven't checked out the Facebook group Eastern Current Fishing, go check that out. It's a great way to connect with other listeners. Please give us a ranking on iTunes, Spotify, any of the areas that you listen to the podcast on. That'd be awesome. If you watch on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. We work really hard to bring y'all really solid information and tricks and tactics and whatnot as far as inshore fishing goes, from Virginia, Maryland, all the way down to the Florida Keys. And so we hope that you do enjoy it, and we hope you learn something from it. We hope you catch more fish. But tonight, me and Dan are gonna, our passion, one of our passions is fly fishing. One for redfish, but even more so than fly fishing, it's just the act of sight fishing for redfish and kind of what that entails and the hunt of it all.
Yeah, I mean, really just being able to hunt those fish, like you said. You're not just fishing and sitting around waiting. You're really getting back in the creek and
stalking,
hunting those fish, trying not to spook them.
Definitely.
And then enticing them to eat a bait close enough to the boat where you can see what's happening.
Yeah. Sometimes too close for comfort.
Yeah. Sometimes they get right underneath you and they bolt pretty quick. Yeah,
but we're gonna share with y'all tonight kind of what we've learned over our multiple years of targeting fish in shallow water and sight fishing, and kind of try to help y'all understand, the differences, kind of some of the nuances and some of the things that we had to learn the hard way. So hopefully that y'all will be able to, to catch more fish and to maybe even, if you haven't done any sight fishing, kind of, open your eyes up to what might be just a little bit shallower from where you've already been fishing. So we're going to kind of go into it and hopefully y'all like it. We'll start out with this. Like in the wintertime, the water is so clear, and sight fishing is very, very visual, more so than a lot of times. You can see fish from far away, but at the same time, fish can see you really well. So let's kind of go through, Dan, share with people kind of your approach on fish. Like this time of year, if you see fish, they're in an area, they're in an area. Let's start with you are looking for fish.
The best way that I've discovered to find fish in the wintertime, first off, they're always schooled up in bigger schools.
Yeah.
They're not, occasionally you find some singles in some smaller schools.
Safety in numbers, I guess, in the winter.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about the cold water that makes fish school up. It's just kind of a general known thing that fish school up in the cooler water. But I always get to the farthest point of the creek, as far back as I can get. And I usually just find fish at that farthest point on muddy bottoms.
Yeah. Deeper holes,
muddy bottoms. It seems like, when I'm fishing the river, I do tend to find smaller schools.
Mm-hmm.
Up this way, up north in this clear water, they tend to be in much bigger schools, which can make them much harder to find as well, because they'll kind of be in the bigger creeks and the bigger, deeper holes.
Yeah.
And if you push that whole school, a lot of times they'll still bite, but it does make them very spooky because you can just run right up on them. When you're coming in the creek, not expecting them to be in that main part of the creek, trying to work your way back. So I guess just kind of go to the areas where you would generally find fish and then work your way back slowly, and just be prepared, to find that much bigger school. Don't be thinking that you're going to find a fish here and a fish there. Just know that there's probably only one school of fish in there this time of year.
Yeah, it's funny, a lot of the fish will hang out together, trout, black drum, redfish, kind of all in the similar zones. And one thing that plays true from, Virginia all the way down to Florida is when that water starts to cool off, fish want to put themselves in a place that they can survive a cold snap. I mean, they don't want to be way
That's
up in something shallow. They want to be near an area where they can get in deep water quickly.
Yes.
In the winter, and so they'll transition. Yeah, the shallower the water, the quicker it's going to get cold, but also the quicker it's going to get warm. So they like those shallow water to deep water transition areas.
And the same thing with the muddy bottom too. The muddy bottom really heats up a lot faster.
Yeah.
Than just the sandy bottoms do.
For sure.
And I think that's part of the reason why here down in the river you'll find smaller schools of fish, because the water's not quite as cold, so they don't have to school up in such big schools as they do up here up north where it's all sand bottom.
Yeah. I think where I want to take this podcast today is, through sight fishing, and especially in the winter, like fish can get pretty pressured, they can get smart. So I think we're going to talk a lot about like tactics and approach, and then also, why fly fishing is such a good, way to target these fish when they're spooky, as well as we're going to go over on our Patreon account at the end of this. If y'all are a Patreon member, you can slide over there. And me and Dan are going to share with y'all some kind of sneaky wintertime baits that work really well. Some stuff that y'all wouldn't think of.
Secret.
Dan's got one big secret he's going to share. So if you haven't subscribed to our Patreon, go over there. We do extra content at the end of each episode. We go over there and share a little bit of extra stuff, sometimes some juicier stuff. So definitely go over there and check that out. But let's talk a little bit about, like, all right, we found our fish, because obviously we can't sit here and tell you, where to go fish. That's the most important thing, I think, as a fisherman, is finding these areas yourself. And once you can network, sharing stuff with other people, but fish you find yourself and target, properly.
Half of the fun is finding the fish.
Definitely.
I mean, that really is, part of it is the achievement of finding the fish. I forget who said this, but I read it the other day. It's not that the fish is what you're actually chasing. It's the elusive but attainable experience that you really
that's good.
Really after.
Elusive but attainable is two very good words that come into that. But it's that. It's the same thing with hunting. It's like you're kind of chasing that what if. Like, all right, what if this kind of pans out? It's pretty cool. All right, so one of the most important things when sight fishing, whether you're on a kayak, whether you're wading, is knowing where the fish is, but also, being aware of where you are in placement of your boat, of your kayak, of your paddleboard, if you're wading. When these fish are schooled up, it's very easy to spook the school with a bad cast, especially as these fish get pressured. And the happier you can keep the fish, the more fish you can catch, and the more fish you can catch in the future. So, Dan, go over a little bit kind of how you like to position your kayak when you're fishing on a school of redfish.
Well, in the summertime, they're much more active. I don't actually typically kayak fish much in the wintertime. I just don't simply have the gear. And I'm not a huge wintertime fishing guy anyways. I'll go when we get the unusually warm days here. But if it's nice, I'll go when it's 40 degrees or something outside. But for the most part, I don't.
Wait till it's a little warmer.
Yeah, I don't like going when it's blowing 15 knots and 30 degrees outside.
Yeah.
But so no, in the wintertime, what I usually like to do is, like I said, you work your way back in the creek. Just take your time so you don't spook that big school, so you don't blow them out first thing when you get in the creek. And when you find them, just set up, you'll see the fish because the water's clear. And you just set up, 15, 20 feet away. Try not to spook them. And be really, really quiet. No jumping around the boat, no making loud noises. Cast over the school. Don't cast directly into the school because they're really spooky this time of year. And they're really, what's the word?
Lethargic?
Lethargic, yeah. They're really lethargic. So you got to fish really slow this time of year. You can use baits that you typically use in the summer, except for topwater. They're not going to hit topwater very well, if at all, this time of year. I know I got on some really good fish last weekend, and we threw topwater just for fun because there were so many fish, and they just ran from it.
Yeah.
They didn't even mess with it.
Yeah.
So, clear water, you're going to use your brighter color, natural color baits. Dark water, you want to use your darker color baits. The difference is that you can use the same baits, but you have to fish really, really slow.
Yeah.
Scented baits help a lot this time of year.
Yeah, scent definitely helps.
As far as fly fishing goes, you're going to do the same thing, but with your fly rod.
Yeah. I think one thing that's so important, and every year I tell myself I'm going to get a power pole for my skiff, but it doesn't have to be a power pole. But this time of year, being able to stake yourself out away from the school, and a lot of times these schools of redfish, and this is in the summer or the winter, when they're in a zone, they kind of want to just work back and forth in that zone. Now, it's very tempting to chase the fish to one side, then to the other side, then to one side, then the other side. But you're doing nothing but pressuring those fish and making it harder for yourself and other people to catch them in the future.
That's exactly right. I mean, the fish that we got on this past weekend, we would stake out and catch a few, and then it'd kind of bump the school down the creek a little bit. But we just stayed knowing that they would come back, and then they came right back and we'd catch a few more. And we just did that over and over and over. We probably caught 15 plus fish out of one school.
Yeah.
It's probably not great to sit there and hammer a school like that,
right?
But we didn't have a whole lot of time to fish, and the fish were there. You can also, kind of corner the fish this time of year where they can't really get past you out of the creek, but they can't go much further back in the creek.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of fun too. It's just like kind of fishing in a barrel.
Right? Yeah, it definitely can be. I like to kind of try to set up on an edge where they don't really know I'm there. Like the only time that they get bumped or interacted with is when I hook a fish and it freaks out for a second. Or when somebody hooks a fish and it freaks out for a second. Letting those fish kind of interact in that space that they like. The more time you spend in a zone, in an area this time of year, you'll learn the habits of the fish, where they like to go up when it's warm, where they like to sit when it's cold, what they do when it's pressured, or when they feel pressured, sitting deep and kind of looking like that dark color. When they're real happy this time of year, they'll sit mid-water column, sometimes float up on the surface on a warm day, and they'll be glowing, and they're fun to catch.
One time we went camping in the winter, and I put you in that mud flat way back there in the marsh. It was so sick. It was super shallow, and there's kind of this deep mud hole, and there's these like 4 or 5 fish just floating really high and happy.
That was fun.
And Jud dropped the gurgler in there, and the fish just came and just sipped it right off the top.
That was fun. That was like 8 or 9 years ago.
That was a
long time ago.
I'll never forget that eat. That was so great.
That was sweet. That was super cool. But like Dan was saying, casting over the school and working a bait back through the school is a pretty good way to target them. Also, if they're moving down a creek, leading the fish a long ways and let's say the fish I'm up on a shoreline and these fish are moving up and down through the creek. It's real tempting to just drop it in there on top of them. But if I lead them a little bit and let those fish, the first couple of fish, swim across that bait, and then start working that bait in the middle of the school where the fish in there are much more comfortable than the fish on the outside of the school, you'll usually get picked up immediately. And when I'm saying work the bait, you're not, hopping it and reeling it in. I'm just kind of sitting there shaking it on the school.
Yeah, and a lot of times you can, if you're fishing a shrimp imitation bait, you can just drag it on the bottom and they'll pick it up. A lot of times you don't need to twitch or jerk it or anything. Just literally just kind of dead stick it right through the middle of that school and they'll just swim in there and pick it up. It's a really soft bite this time of year.
Yeah.
It's not, you're not going to hit it and take off with you. Or just kind of feel the thump, feel a little bit of pressure, and you set into them. And you can really tell this time of year. I mean, the fish don't even fight near as hard as they do in the summertime.
Yeah, you'll get a little drag pull and then back to the boat.
Yeah.
They will get pretty fired up. You get a couple warm days this time of year. I think spring's here and they'll start to get pretty fired up. But it typically it's a safe time of year to catch fish. They don't burn too much energy getting to the boat. The water's cool. A lot of oxygen. So it's a good time of year to if you need to pull a fish out of the water and get a picture and whatnot, let them go.
What's your favorite fly pattern for this time of year, Jud?
Man, I don't get super crazy on my fly patterns at all.
That's a pretty good shrimp looking pattern hanging around the side.
Right here?
The tan one too.
This one?
Yep.
I've got a video on YouTube. This is pretty similar. This is actually tied out of my golden retriever's tail hair, but I call this the golden deceiver. But I use a little craft fur or EP fiber up around the head, and then I'll just use some craft fur as a tail usually, and just keep it pretty simple. A lot of times I'll put a weed guard in, but just a little simple. I'd probably fish that a little bit shorter. This is if you're listening about a white and tan. It's about 5 inches long, but really sparsely dressed. It's pretty thin, small little bait. But in the winter, I might shorten it up to 2.5, 3 inches, and it just
we had a lot of short shanks last weekend.
Yeah, a lot of short bites.
Just throwing soft plastics. They would just grab the back of the bait and kind of pull it halfway down the hook. Some of them were smaller fish, but even some of the bigger fish were doing it.
Yeah.
So just not feeding real aggressive.
Yeah, it's it can be you can deal with a lot of that, especially with the trout too. Like you'll sit in an area and see a bunch of fish and get some small little bites and a lot of non-bites, a lot of fishing areas and not getting the fish to bite. The redfish will usually always, play along, but if they get heavily pressured this time of year, I've watched large schools of fish get heavily pressured and you throw a bait in there and they won't pick it up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, another thing too is, when you get on those fish, especially if you're working a creek and fly fishing, don't let your shadow hit them.
Yeah.
If your shadow hits them, you're gonna blow them out.
Yeah.
That's gonna be it. They're gonna. I don't know if they correlate the shadow with an osprey or what, but they do not like it when random shadows hit them.
Yeah. Another thing that I'm just kind of rolling through. I know this podcast is a little less organized, but just rolling through what's popping in my head. A big thing that I share with a lot of clients that I think is a huge factor, especially this time of year when fish get spooky, is, you know, if your boat rocks at all and sends a little wake out, it'll spook fish. Fly fishing as well as just normal casting, but a lot of times fly fishing, when you're casting, your feet are kind of spread out and you don't even realize it, but you're rocking back and forth a little bit, rocking the boat. I always tell people when we're on a school of fish and we're fishing, I want them to stand with their feet as close together as they possibly can. You know, you're kind of dialing your center of gravity into one place, and you can't rock the boat as much. I mean, you can still rock it, but you're going to fall over. It's going to make you stay more still if you've got your feet side by side. If you watch a lot of, you know, fly fishing videos and whatnot when they're in shallow water, targeting redfish and snook and bonefish and whatnot, you'll see these guys with their feet literally, you know, touching on the casting platform.
That's a great point.
Yeah, it keeps you from rocking the boat. I know you've even seen it, you know, with a kayak, like getting up even in the summer really shallow, just a little subtle change of.
Those belly crawlers are so spooky. If they're belly crawling, I mean, super shallow with half their body out of the water. I mean, if you land the bait too close to them, they're gone.
Yeah. Another big thing this time of year in that clear water is trolling motor. If you are on a school and you're chasing them back and forth on a trolling motor, they learn what a trolling motor is and what the sound of it is so quickly. So really, I mean, I couldn't stress to you more. You know, people think these fish come and stay in a creek or a pocket for a week or two. They'd stay much longer if people fish them properly without chasing them around. They'd really stick around and be happier fish. But I'm running, when I'm on fish or could be on fish quickly or nearby, I really don't run my trolling motor over 2.5 or 3, even in deep water. And a big thing about running a trolling motor on fish, especially schools of fish, is even when you see those fish, don't change the speed of your trolling motor and don't cut it off. Like when I'm about to cast,
don't spot lock either.
Don't spot lock it.
And blows water everywhere.
Oh yeah, but even just the subtle cutting it off. You might be running at 2 and cut it off, and just that change of noise and vibration will spook the fish. I've watched it happen so many times. And I mean, even running off of 1. You know, you talk to these old timers up in the Pamlico that used to fish the big bull reds up there, and they used to fish them on the motor. Like they'd idle up to the Menhaden balls
and just leave it running.
And just leave it running and throw the popping corks in there and catch them that way. They weren't running trolling motors. You know, a lot of those guys still don't run trolling motors, and they'll just idle up to them like that. But keeping that you got to think, if a trolling motor comes in from a long distance away, it just gradually.
Yeah, you're just going to gradually build up that noise, but if it changes the minute it gets there, then they notice.
Exactly. Even from 1.5 to 2, it can spook them.
Yeah.
So another thing is be cautious of, you know, if I'm trolling motoring and I'm in shallow water for redfish, is I have my motor trimmed up to where the bottom of my boat is, so my skegg's not going to hit an oyster and spook the fish. Mm-hmm. Kind of really being cautious of where your boat can draft in, what your boat can draft in, and really focusing on trying to keep that boat, you know, away and quiet, not spooking those fish.
And it's nice to do this time of year with the water being so clear. You don't necessarily have to fish at dead low tide to find a school of fish, because you can still see those fish, you know, even if you're halfway down towards the low tide.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, you definitely still find, you know, when you have a lot of fish like that, they're still definitely seeable from a distance, even when the water's a little bit higher.
100%.
And, you know, this past weekend, we caught a few fish on fly till I broke my buddy's fly rod. and you know, we were not in a technical bowling skiff by any means.
Yeah.
It's just got a K on a skiff with a trolling motor. So don't think that if you're watching this podcast or you're listening in, don't think that just because you don't have, you know, a Maverick, you know, or a Hell's Bay or a high-end skiff or even, you know, a low-end skiff like a Gino, that you can't go do this and catch these fish on fly rod. Because if you've got a bay boat or a kayak or a canoe or whatever it is, you know, a lot of times this time of year you can still find those fish in deep enough creeks to go have a fun time with.
Yeah, definitely. And you got that visibility that you really need when that water clears up, that you can see them in deeper water. That's a big, I mean, those tools, any tool you can have in your pocket is going to help you. So a skiff I consider a tool to get done what I like to get done in the fishing.
It's definitely
in a day
easier
fishing.
With a bowling skiff.
It is easier, but it doesn't.
It's not required.
It's not required, definitely.
In the summertime, it makes it a bit harder because you can't see the fish, so you're just going to be doing a lot of line casting, especially with a fly rod, to try to find fish in the summertime.
Right.
Without a polling skiff and being able to fish that super low tide when you can't see the fish pushing.
Yeah.
This time of year, you definitely don't need it.
And I can't stress to y'all enough, when you first find a school and you're all fired up on it, catch a bunch of fish. Go out there and catch a bunch of fish. But, if you know that the school's there, don't come back day after day and catch 20 fish out of it, because it's going to put pressure on those fish. They'll leave. They'll get really hard to catch. Just be okay with coming in, catching 1 or 2 fish, 2 or 3 fish, and leaving and go try to find another school.
Yeah, I think 2 or 3 fish is a good number because, I have done that, early in our amateur days when we found a nice big school of wintertime fish. We would go in there and we'd hammer them, catch 10 or 12 fish out of it. And you do that twice, they're gone.
Yeah, they freak out, man. And if they don't, they're just getting more and more pressured and smarter and smarter. So, yeah, I think it's becoming a good steward of the resource is really what it boils down to.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I'm trying to think of what else we can talk about. As far as fly fishing goes, this time of year is a good time of year because you can really see the fish well, and you can also see your fly well. And I think that's such a relevant, not relevant, but that's such an important part of fly fishing is when you make that cast, any type of sight fishing, you make a cast to the fish, you want to be watching your lure. I'm not looking at the fish. I'm looking at the fish through my peripherals and focused on my lure. And so I know where that fish is. I know exactly when to move that lure. As soon as you look away from your lure, which is the harder thing to see, you have completely lost, reference of where it is according to the fish. The fish is going to be much easier to pick up out of, the corner of your eye. The lure you need to focus on. That's kind of what I always tell people, especially when you bomb a lure into, onto the edge of a school of redfish. You can strip it right through, but if you kind of sit there and watch that bait, watch that fly, and kind of work it to a certain fish, it's a lot more fun, a lot more challenging.
And it's definitely easier to catch them on fire this time of year, of course, the water being clear, like we've been saying, because you can watch that fish eat your fly.
Yeah.
When you're fishing a spinning rod, and fishing hard bait or soft plastic, you get your line pretty tight, especially when you're fishing with braid, and you can feel that bite. On fire rod with your floating fly line, it's not quite as easy, especially if you have any wind at all.
Right.
Versus if you can watch that fish eat your fly and then strip set into him, it's so much easier to hook up with a fire rod this time.
For sure, it definitely is. It's also easy to strip it away from his face because it's so visual.
Yeah,
it's so
get all
visual.
Nervous and comes in there to eat it and just pull it out of his mouth.
So tell me about this, Dan. What would you say your preferred setup is this time of year as far as a spinning rod? As far as reel size, rod size, braid, leader, what do you like to fish?
I've been fishing a 2500 and a medium light, which is a lot of fun this time of year because fish don't fight super hard. But anywhere from that, plus if you get on a nice school of trout, then you're not overgunned for a nice school of trout.
Right.
You're still kind of got a trout rod in your hand, but also just a 3000 size reel with a medium rod.
Okay. What reel have you been running lately?
I like the NASCI by Shimano.
Yeah.
That's a really, really affordable reel. It's really nice. It kind of took place of the Stratic. I think that a couple of years ago, it seemed like, because the NSAI has not been out for that long, NASCI, I think I'm pronouncing it right, has not been out for a very long time from what I know.
I've been calling that Nasi.
Nasi.
Not that I ever heard anybody say that, but
that's kind of what I've been calling it, but I didn't want to say that on podcast. So
the Shimano Nasi.
That's what I've been using the past couple years, just because it's right at $100.
Yeah.
I don't like buying really cheap reels. I don't like buying super expensive reels.
$100 is not too hard to part with.
Yeah, it's not. You can get a really nice reel for that price, and it's got a great drag. It's super smooth. I don't notice that much of a difference between it and some of the more top end reels, like $250 reels.
Yeah.
I've got I think I got 2 or 3 seasons on my Nassies now.
My Nassies. If we're saying that wrong, we're sorry.
And they've, I don't know, if I had to guess, I don't know, maybe 5,000 casts. No, probably more than that. 10,000 casts a reel, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know, a lot. And I've caught a lot of fish on both of them. And they've just now got it so where even with the handle tightened down on both sides, I've got a little bit of back play going on.
Gotcha.
And the drag's definitely kind of worn out. Definitely need new drag washers, which I haven't replaced. But
you feel like it's held up pretty well?
Yeah, for a
$100 reel?
Yeah, for a $100 reel, they're incredible.
How long did you say you've had it?
Probably 2 or 3 seasons now.
Wow.
And I fish, a lot, probably every weekend, multiple times, sometimes multiple times a week.
Yeah.
Not quite as much as you do, of course, but for just your recreational angler, they're more than enough.
Heck yeah. It's fine. It's kind of finding what you like, and like some people don't care about the reel as much. They'd rather have a lighter, softer rod. Some people don't care about the rod as much. I have nice gear, but I've never been one that's like, got the super fancy rods and reels as far as my spin gear goes.
I've always been middle of the line.
Yeah, middle of the line is kind of where it's at. And for me, it's more about the rod. I really like a rod set up that I can feel the bite well with. Now, how important do you feel like your braid size is and your braid choice when it comes to redfish in the winter?
I feel like recently I've discovered that I fish a little bit heavier braid than most guys do. I've been fishing with a couple guys I haven't fished with much recently, and they're fishing 12 to 15 pound braid, 15 being on the heavier side. I've always fished 20 pound braid on all my inshore stuff. Even my medium white trout rods, just because I'm fishing around so much structure around here.
Yeah, definitely.
We're not fishing in Florida where the only structure is mangroves, and if you're mostly fishing flats, we've got oyster bars, and then you just have the marsh grass in general that the fish like to get wrapped up in, and then you're fishing around docks and jetty, and there's so much stuff to cut your.
You really need like 10 or 15 rods set up. Do you feel like throwing that 20 pound braid? Do you feel like it hurts you on your casting distance at all?
No, I feel like having the right rod levels that out.
Yeah.
I definitely cast more than most of the guys. I definitely cast further than most of the guys that I fish with.
Yeah, it's so much time and momentum. I will say personally, I can with lighter braid, I can cast it a little bit further. It feels like I can cast it. I can cast it the same distance maybe, but with less effort.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I'm putting a lot into my rods with 20 pound on it to get it out there. But
I've just been fishing for 20 pound for so long.
You got it dialed.
Yeah, I just don't know what it would be like to fish anything lighter.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't use a rod under 7 foot. All my rods are 7 foot or 7.2.
7.2 is a sweet little length.
I just ordered 2 new Lamy glass rods.
Nice, heck yeah.
So
which rod? The black salts?
No, not the black salt, just the black.
Okay, sweet.
So just and again, that's just kind of a really good middle of the line road. I don't, black salt is $200 and something bucks.
Yeah.
And the black comes in right at like 130.
Heck yeah.
So for
what'd you get? 7.2 medium lights?
Yep.
Nice.
No, just the mediums.
Mediums,
so
gotcha.
I've got medium lights already, so I needed something that was just a little bit heavier for throwing top water in summertime.
Gotcha.
So that's why I got those. Those are for coming for the summer.
Nice, heck yeah.
But just having medium light rods, medium rods, and then maybe some medium heavy live bait rod if you do any live bait fishing is kind of what I fish with, and really just kind of run 20 pound on everything. I think I might step down to probably 15 though.
Yeah, on some of your lighter stuff.
Yeah, I'm gonna step down, but I don't think your braid size matters a whole lot except for your casting distance. I think, of course, your fluorocarbon leader makes a big difference.
Yeah,
and fluorocarbon this time of year is ideal. Even fly fishing this time of year, if you can buy the pre-tapered leaders, it's still a good idea to tie like a little 3 foot section of fluorocarbon on the end.
Getting that extra length, the fly line's oftentimes going to spook fish if it comes over top of them, lands over top of them. But in the wintertime when the water's super clear, it's even more so.
Especially the fluorocarbon because it just disappears.
Yeah, it disappears for sure. I really like to, this time of year, if I can get away with it, fish 15 pound fluorocarbon leader. The Top Shot, Yozuri Top Shot, has been a serious crowd pleaser for me lately. I've really liked the durability of it. It's a small spool. It's a little less expensive, but it's a kind of a red packaging. They've got an Intercoastal Angler on their leader aisle, but I've been through a lot of different types of leaders. I've really been trying to find what I like.
I've always stuck with the Seaguar.
Yeah, the Seaguar's awesome. The Yozuri Top Shot's great, and there's another little hack if you're trying to save money too is you can buy fluorocarbon mainline for way cheaper. So I can get a spool of Seaguar mainline that you'd put on in freshwater, a spinning reel or a bait caster reel. And I can get a whole spool of that would spool an entire reel for $12.
Do you like the mainline? Do you find it's a different between the real leader material and just fluorocarbon mainline?
Man, I think it's pretty solid. It really is. The Seaguar stuff that I've used is pretty legit. There is a slight difference in the suppleness of that leader. But the invisibility, if you will, of it is, I swear, the same. And you can go down on the size a little bit if you need to. But as far as when I'm trout fishing in the fall with clients and I'm not hunting for a big fish. I'm just out there trying to catch a bunch of trout. It's a great leader. You know, I'm cutting it. I'm going through, in 2 days, I probably go through, you know, who knows, probably 15 feet of leader, just about, you know, off of cutting stuff off, cutting wind nuts out.
That adds up a lot for you.
Yeah, it adds up. Maybe not 15 feet. Maybe, I bet I go through 6 to 8 feet every 2 days of leader. And so finding something that's a little bit cheaper that still works well is important for me. And I'm not losing fish because of it, but I don't think I'm.
I never forget, I was fishing with a guide when I was younger, when I first got into inshore fishing, and he had so many rods, and I was like, you know, I was just curious, why do you need so many rods? So I asked him. He's like, well, one, because you can have all these different baits rigged up, and two, and I'm like, well, why not just change baits? And he's like, well, fluorocarbon's expensive.
That's awesome.
And I was always trying to figure out how the math worked out of having so many rods versus the cost of fluoro.
That's pretty funny. Fluorocarbon's expensive. The rods are cheap. You know, brand new rods are super cheap.
I never made that sense to me, but I always thought that was really funny.
That is funny. Well, that's kind of, we're running a little bit shorter podcast tonight just because of Dan's timing and my timing. We are going to slide over onto Patreon and talk about a few of our favorite flies and our favorite baits for fishing in the wintertime. And there's some stuff on there that I guarantee you haven't fished in the winter that really, really opens up, you know, a whole new opportunity on these fish when they get real spooky. So.
And I've got 2 big bombs I'm going to drop on Patreon.
Dan's going to drop 2 big bombs. Guys, thanks for checking out this podcast. If you haven't checked it out before, you know, subscribe to us on YouTube, subscribe on any of the podcast platforms, and we hope to hear y'all. Not hear y'all, y'all gonna be hearing us. We hope to see y'all on the next one. Later.